I have been so hesitant to show some of these photos, but the evolution of my home is also the entire reason why I built the business I built. And the reason I am so passionate about trying to bring these services to more people. So, my story is a little bit unique. I grew up in Ohio, and when I was 18, I decided I wanted to go out of state for college. I thought I was going to work for Disney. I loved art and design. I had done so much with art projects in my high school program, so much so that I was kind of tracked into this program at SCAD, which is the Savannah College of Art and Design, for visual effects. So kind of think about the people who create like haunted houses and the props for haunted houses. That's what I had done in high school. I had built design sets. I had, like I said, created these like animatronic monsters and done all these cool effects. And it was such a specific program at my high school that it had this very specific track program at SCAD. And I loved it. I loved doing all of these things, but I also wanted to maybe make some money one day. And I did realize that it was so niche and it didn't apply to most of the jobs in the US. And so I wanted to find something that was both creative but also had more growth potential and career potential over time. So I ended up going to the University of Tampa for marketing. I thought that this was going to be the perfect mix of creative and business. And along the way, I actually really fell in love with the business world and entrepreneurs and building a business and everything that goes into kind of the strategy and product building. And I fell in love with the idea of building and owning a business. But like I said, when I went to Tampa, I thought I was going to work for Disney. Disney has a program very similar to what I did in high school. And so I thought it would be really cool basically to work corporate for Disney, to do some sort of marketing or to kind of work in that specific department, but then have a way to transition out of that department if I didn't want to do that forever. But because of all that, I decided I wanted to work for Disney over the summers. So when I was 18, instead of going home each summer like most people do to see their parents, I wanted to work in the parks. And living in Tampa, you're about a 45 minute drive from Orlando and the parks. But to do that, because I was a student and living on campus, I had to find a place to live over the summers. And so I initially started looking at apartments. I had a job, I had some support from my parents, and when I started the apartment hunt, my dad stepped in, and my dad is both very smart and very savvy. And yes, I will get emotional bringing this up because I am very grateful for the way that this actually worked out. But my dad stepped in and said, I don't want you throwing money away on an apartment. You'll never get that investment back. He said, I want to use a chunk of my retirement money to buy a property in Tampa that you will live in and then pay rent. So in 2016, at the age of 19, I went home hunting, which is a story all in of itself. But I ended up finding a small property in Tampa, and again, I'm a little emotional about this because I'm super grateful. The home housing market changed dramatically in the next 6 years following, and our property value has gone up like 4 times what we initially paid for, which is amazing because hopefully it was a good investment for my dad, but it's also given my fiance and I a really good financial base that I am super grateful for and that I know is not an option for everyone right now. So that is my little emotional beginning. But all of this leads into really the evolution of my home. So I was going to college. I had this house, and I'd always been kind of interested in decor. I was the kid growing up who wanted to build a Barbie house, but like not really to play with the Barbie house, to design the Barbie house. I loved American Girl dolls. My dad made me this American Girl doll house out of these big metal storage shelves that he had in the garage, and like designing these little rooms and decorating them for holidays and setting up photo shoots in the rooms in their little outfits. I think I played with my dolls in a way that most people don't play with their dolls. And then as I got older, my mom really kind of let me play with my bedroom. So I was painting both my bedroom and my closet at like age 12. Luckily, I'm pretty good at painting because that really could have been a nightmare, but I think my mom just figured it's paint and we'll fix it. So I was really excited that I had this house to decorate. But I was also a college student who was working. I think I was maybe making like $900 a month. And so I was both paying rent to my dad and obviously trying to pay for some school stuff. And then whatever money was really left, I was putting towards my house. So when I work with clients and they're like, you know, I don't have a super large budget, or I don't think I can do this with this amount of money. Like, I decorated my home with maybe $60 a month over a period of 10 years. And that's what I'm going to show you, is the evolution and also how long it really takes to build out a design. And the quality of the design when it's finished doesn't really have to do with money. It has a lot to do with time, but it also just has a lot to do with skill and learning how things like come together. So I am super embarrassed by these photos, and please, for the love of God, do not stop watching the video here, because if you think this is an example of my work, I will forever be mortified. So thank you. But I really started out like, this was prime era of Joanna Gaines, fixer-upper, modern farmhouse. But I also happen to be someone who really loved color. I still am. Like, you will see, I love color, and I often shy away from talking about that because I don't want someone to think that if they hire me to work on their space that I'm gonna come in and paint their walls hot pink, because I would never do that to someone else. I might do that to myself. I might really enjoy that, but that's a side rant. What I'd like to point out, and the reason I included all these photos, is because, quite frankly, this is what everyone does when they get their first home. You're so excited to throw all your ideas into a space. Like, we've all had our Pinterest boards for forever. We all save things on Instagram or take screenshots or like dream about what that house is going to look like when we finally get the chance to do it. And I also want to say this is true of apartments. I talk about houses a lot, but it's the same feeling, and a lot of times it's the same process. You're just more constrained in what you can do because you don't own the property. But this feeling is not unique to just a home. So as you can see, I was someone who really loved turquoise. This kitchen was like the bane of my existence for so long. So if I went out and bought a property now, I would pay way more attention to the kitchen. But I just wasn't in a spot to do that. It couldn't be part of the reason I bought or didn't buy the house, because I hated this kitchen. The wood cabinets, the color of the wood was not awful. It was just really dark. And at the time, my heart was so set on that white kitchen with the turquoise walls, the little beach vibe, very much that like Pinterest or Instagram like beach shack with the surfboard on the wall, California aesthetic. Like, I had saved all the things. And so moving into the house and having these dark wood cabinets and these countertops that I hated more than anything, it was hard. And my mom kind of knew that. And so even though this turquoise looks absolutely awful in the kitchen, she was like, just paint the walls the color you want them to be. And I love her a lot, and she did that because she just wanted me to have this one thing I really wanted in the room. But it was also like the worst advice that you could give in terms of design for this kitchen, because what this does, and what I talk about with a lot of clients, is it highlights everything you don't like, because it doesn't cohesively go with what is already there. And so you can see in the design and kind of feel in the aesthetic that you're fighting against these things you don't like. So there are much better ways to do this transition, and I know that now, but I was 19 and I didn't. We were fulfilling a lifelong dream of a turquoise kitchen. And if all of this alone doesn't tell you what the aesthetics of the time are, my little coffee bar with my Keurig sure should. This is basically a time capsule at this point. When I first moved into my house, so I got keys in May, I moved in, I had set aside $800 for things for my home, and that basically covered a mattress, a bed frame, like a metal bed frame I got off Amazon for like $40, a trash can, because you never think of the fact that you have to buy a trash can, and a little end table that I put my TV on. I didn't have a couch. I didn't have any dining furniture. I didn't have a dresser. Nothing. There was nothing. Like, I lived in the house like that for about a month and a half. And then my parents brought down a bunch of old furniture for me to use. And my grandparents gave me, I think, like $500 towards some furniture. And I was so excited because I went to Pier 1, and Pier 1 was having this sale on furniture. And so I bought this dining table and this couch for like $500, which is still a big win. Like $500 for 2 pieces of furniture, especially in today's like current climate, is insane. Like brand new, perfect condition. But I was so focused on just having the couch, just having the table, that I paid basically no attention to the aesthetic. Like, I looked at the couch and I was like, oh, okay, it's cream, it's whatever, it'll match anything. And now I know better. And the same thing happened with the dining table. Like, it was just a table. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, it was gonna work. And then, as you can see in that photo, you know, again, I painted the walls a color that I really liked. And then I thought, oh, what goes with everything, it'll go. And this room in particular makes me cringe so hard. It's so bad. I can laugh about it now. But like I said, I learned so many of these things that I now like preach and try and talk people out of, because I did everything, basically everything wrong to start. And in hindsight, I lost a lot of money doing it. What you will see is that my house has changed so dramatically, and I've tried to be smart about the way that I update spaces. I sold all of this furniture on Facebook Marketplace, whatever, and while I recouped some money, you never get back the full amount of what you spent, and you definitely never make money on it. So while I didn't throw this furniture out or just take it all to Goodwill, like, I used some of that money to help furnish the house in ways that I did really like. But if I had stopped myself before all of this happened, I would have saved a lot of money that then could have been used towards things I really wanted. Because in all honesty, I never even sat at that dining room table. So I had it in my head that I had to have this dining room table, like I had to have chairs for people to sit, whatever. I ate on my couch. Like, I was 19 in college. I wasn't having people over for dinner parties. Like, I was coming home at 10 p.m. after classes, after working all day, to eat, take out on my couch and watch Netflix. Like, there was no reason for me to spend money on that. And I've been able to help a lot of my friends stay out of this trap too, as they're kind of furnishing their first apartment or collecting items for their space. Like, there's certain things you're just not going to need, And when you're on a smaller budget, the money that you do spend has to be so much more impactful. Now, here is a space I'm not completely embarrassed by. So while I did kind of the main house so quickly that it became kind of the disaster that you just saw, my bedroom was actually one of the spaces that I put intention into. And so I'm not embarrassed by this space. I was really into kind of this like boho glam concept at the time. I was a free people girl, like for sure, for a section of years. And this room, I actually think there's a couple things now technically I would probably change, but in general, I'm pretty proud of. That dresser on the right, my mom helped me stain it. I learned how to stain a dresser for the first time. And then I hand painted a lot of those like medallion details on the dresser. So I was really proud of that project, and from both a color standpoint and a texture standpoint, there's a lot of good things I actually did in this space. And I don't know without this space if I would have continued designing my home. And this is another thing that I really like to talk about, is the fact that if I had only made the decisions for the first part of the house and it had gone terribly wrong, and then I did this space and I also didn't like it, I would have probably been done. Like, I would have backed away and said, okay, I'm not spending money on this. It's not turning out the way I want. I would have gotten super frustrated. And I see this happen a lot, that what starts as excitement and this kind of like dream energy of getting to do all the things you've been kind of planning in your head for forever, into stress because it's not turning out the way you want, or really a headache because you can't figure out why it's not working or what's not going right. I try and give people confidence boost along the way, because that's what you need to keep going. Like, if you do 4 or 5 different things and you take the time and the energy and you're so excited and then they fail, you don't want to do anything anymore. And rightfully so, you don't want to waste more money. That doesn't feel fun and exciting. And so this bedroom was really, I think, pivotal in keeping my excitement going. This was my first kind of like aha moment of, okay, wait, I'm learning something. Something's coming together. Something's working. Maybe I can do this. Like, maybe it will turn out okay. And I'm really passionate about helping other people have that moment. One of my best friends has basically 4 cents to her name. Like, is also a college student, has a bunch of college debt, is working her first job, is trying to pay rent in the current economy, like everything basically working against her. But because we're friends, maybe partially my fault, she's super now into design and like doing some of these projects. And so I had an old baby dresser in my garage that was a nice piece of furniture. Like, it's solid wood. It's not a contemporary design. But I told her, I was like, hey, like, if you want to do something to this dresser, you can have the dresser, you can use it, whatever. It's not being used, it's sitting in my garage. So I was actually away at the time visiting family. She spent a week in my garage stripping and sanding this dresser down to its bare bones. I'm talking 25 plus hours of work, sweating in the heat of Tampa in 100 degrees for this dresser. And it is A, beautiful, it looks good, she did a great job, but B, is her favorite piece in her space. So whenever someone comes over to her house, her friends come over, whatever, she's like, you have to come see my dresser. She's so proud of it. She loves showing it off. Like, it makes her so happy. And that is the win and the feeling that like I want for people and my clients, because there's not many things in life that you get to directly control. Like, we don't always get to decide what our office looks like. We don't always get to decide what we're wearing to work. But one of the things that you do have control over is your space directly. And kind of the win or dopamine high of like creating something that you love and getting to take ownership of is such a cool and unique experience that I want more people to have. That's a very long rant. I'm sure you're gonna get more, but this was that moment for me. And because I had that moment, I then moved on to this space. And something you'll learn about me is that I really love a theme. I really love a well-executed concept. I throw these like really elaborate Halloween parties that are kind of immersing you in the space. Like I said, in high school, I built like play design concepts. I love the idea of like creating spaces that feel very specific. So this is definitely very over the top for some people, but was also a really fun concept that I loved in my home. I was a huge Kate Spade fan. This was a super fun space. It was bright. I'm sure someone would call it chuggy today. But design, like fashion, is really a lot of times a reflection of the times, and Kate Spade was super popular. Like, we all loved this aesthetic at one point in time, so I look at this room kind of fondly. Obviously, this is not still my space. But again, I learned a lot about scale in this room. So the scale of the stripes that I painted, painting stripes for the first time was a challenge, but planning out the size of the stripes and like what was appropriate for the space. I had my heart set on this light fixture because it was so cool and it added so much texture to the space, but it was massively too big to the point where you could walk under it, but it was about 2 inches from the top of my head. Like, nothing I would put in someone's home now. But I had to kind of live the scale to learn the scale. And again, now that's something I try and help people not have to live. But this room specifically taught me a lot about scale. Now, both my bedroom and kind of that closet room, as I'll call it, the Kate Spade room, kind of started my dabbling in making this a business. So even though I kind of laugh at some of those spaces now, like friends would come over, people would come into my house, and people were really impressed by these spaces. Again, that kind of makes me laugh now. And so people started asking me to go to Home Goods with them or help them pick out a bedspread, or if they were attempting to paint something, like what color would I paint it? And so I started to notice or had this idea that like maybe I could do this, maybe I could sell these services. And at the time I was still really just making adjustments to my own house out of my own curiosity, excitement. Like, this is just, it's still what I do for fun. Like, this is my hobby. Some people make puzzles, some people paint, some people, I don't know, are obsessed with video games. Like, this is what I do. So, and it's not a cheap hobby, I will say that, but I found lots of ways to do it inexpensively, and that has also really been kind of a selling or foundational part of the business that I created, was this idea that you don't have to have massive amounts of money. If you have a little spending money each month, those things can really add up over time and make dramatic differences. This was my first time kind of dabbling with mid-century modern. I had transitioned out of my like boho phase, and now I was really into mid-century modern furniture. I still am. I will say I have always loved, I grew up watching 50s, 60s movies with my grandparents. Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn. Like, I love this time period. I love the heightened perfection, really, of the aesthetic. This like dream world, this idealistic kind of love story, this idealistic space. Like, the spaces are all really beautiful. Mad Men, like the aesthetics of Mad Men. And while I know historically that time period was not great for women, I really do love the retro nostalgia of this time period. So when I found mid-century modern and kind of started to learn some of the history and the aesthetics, like it was kind of game over. Like I love mid-century modern. But up until this point, I hadn't had any furniture or purchased any furniture or worked in this aesthetic. I redid this kind of vintage console that I bought in St. Pete at this little vintage market. But then I took kind of the colors and the concepts of like the 70s and paired it with this mid-century modern furniture. So the shapes of both the couch and the little accent chair are both very mid-century modern shapes for furniture, but the color palette is a little more 70s, especially in terms of the curtains. So I had a lot of fun in this space. This living room was actually still my fiance's favorite living room. What I will say is my living room has always been a pain project because it is by far the smallest room you have like ever seen. Even to take this photo, this is like on my iPhone wide lens. It's so hard to photograph some of these spaces because they're so small. So this couch, while it was really cute, was not comfortable. And I couldn't, like it was so small, I couldn't extend my legs fully. And I'm only 5'6". So I was starting to learn more about design, but the functionality parts were kind of something I was learning as I was going. So we ended up updating this because the couch like functionally just didn't work, and I spend a lot of time on the couch. Like I like watching TV, so. But I do like to highlight kind of what I learned and when I learned it in this process. So I was working on this space. I was really excited about the aesthetic, but this was the first space that I kind of started to pay more attention to the function. And that kind of became one of the things I focused on moving forward, because again, when you don't have a ton of money, like furniture has to do more than one thing. It can't just be pretty. It can't just be comfortable. It can't just be the right size. Like so many things have to be correct because it has to function in more than one way, because I don't have all the space in the world. But as I was working on this room, I actually started to take kind of like my first clients. And so the photo of me sitting on the couch here is actually like a branding photo that I used when I first like launched my business. And I still remember the first project I did was for a friend I actually went to high school with who had moved to Miami, and she wanted this really kind of extravagant like Art Deco meets like Miami club bedroom. And I was so excited because it was such a fun project. And I think I charged her like $100 for the whole thing, and I like designed the entire bedroom. But I just remember being so excited that like someone had paid me to do this thing that I just did for fun for the first time. Now within this whole time period, I moved into my house in 2016. I met my now fiance, I believe in 2017. I'm trying to think how long we've been together now. But in 2020, it was obviously the height of the pandemic. We had been living together for I think 3 years at the time. That is a whole separate story. But he had kind of moved into this space that I had created for me, and I really wanted to create a space that was like ours. I wanted him to feel like the house wasn't just mine, that he was like moving into or living in, but that it was our home. So I actually did this project as a surprise. My parents happened to be visiting, and every time my parents visit, my dad basically works as like a contractor, and my dad loves projects. So whenever my dad comes to visit, it's kind of like a running joke that he can't come visit without doing a project. Like he won't come visit just to hang out with me. Like he has to have a purpose for being here. So every time he would come visit, like, he would find a project to do for himself. And so at one point my mom was like, just, you need to start like giving him projects that you want done, or else he's just gonna find projects for himself. And so my family was visiting at this point, and I had this idea that I wanted to kind of redo our bedroom, like I said, for the examples I gave. And I think my dad was working on flooring at this point. We did change out a lot of the floors, and that is a big project. I'm going to do a separate video on all the DIYs and like all the things I've learned doing DIYs, but I'm sure this video is going to be long enough. So that was the context of what was happening. And my fiance, I think at the time, had his first like big boy job. That's what we call it. It's kind of like a joke. My big girl job, his big boy job out of college. And he was working remote. Again, this is COVID, this is 2020, and he was working for Progressive at the time. And he had actually been hired before even it was like cool to work from home. They were already having people work from home because he works in like data science. So he was on his computer basically all day trying to work in our small little 1,000 square foot house. I was home sometimes. We ended up getting a puppy during this time period. So I decided at this point that he needed a desk in like a designated work area, and I wanted to do that as kind of like a surprise. So I did it in conjunction with our bedroom. We both really liked kind of the mid-century modern aesthetic. So you see the desk here, the chair, and you can kind of see the nightstand, were all pieces I thrifted or picked up off Facebook Marketplace. So I remember I bought this massive executive desk from someone in St. Pete for $60. And I remember my friend had to go help me pick it up because my car wasn't big enough to put it in at the time. And then I painted and put new handles on it. That chair was actually free. My friend picked it up on the side of the road because she randomly saw it and was like, Taylor needs this chair. And I just kind of painted certain parts of the chair that were really beat up to use it for his desk. And then it was the same thing with the nightstand. So I didn't necessarily paint this furniture because that's the aesthetic I wanted. I painted the furniture to really cover the imperfections of the piece. But I think in total, I maybe spent like $200 for all that furniture and all the paint. And then my dad actually helped me build this little like focal wall or headboard behind our bed. The rug in this space was a rug from Anthropology that I fell in love with, and I ended up finding secondhand on Poshmark. I had bought this previously and it just ended up working in this space, so I moved it. And then again, our bed is still nothing fancy here. This is like a $40 metal frame from Amazon. But one of the things I do care a lot about, and I've always really cared a lot about, is incorporating personal pieces into our home. And it's actually one of the reasons I haven't always shared my home, is because I do have so many personal things that sometimes feel like an invasion of privacy to share with random people on the internet. But all these photos like around his desk were travel photos, family photos. A lot of the things I use to decorate our space are from like little adventures we go on. And like, I'm not talking about some massive trip to Europe. I'm talking about like a weekend in Seattle that, you know, we saved up for. So I know a lot of times in design videos, people talk about like, oh, bring back these antique artifacts from your extensive travels. And you're like, yeah, cool. I'm not planning a $6,000 vacation to Greece. And I'm not going to be buying a $100 antique to then crate overseas. Like, I love this concept, but I think people always think of it as the extreme. Whereas one of the things that I used in my living room was like a license plate from a thrift shop in Seattle because we like loved our trip in Seattle. Or I actually bought a lot of like little home pieces in Seattle. We bought a photo of the first Starbucks that opened in Seattle because we are still massive coffee people, and we like love the experience of getting to see Starbucks. It's like origin story and then going to the rotisserie and whatever. So we had that. Again, they're not super sophisticated art pieces, and they're not super artsy, I guess, for lack of better words, but they were not expensive. They reminded us of our travels, and we were able to kind of tell stories or like talk about things with people when they came over. And they also weren't like some basic piece from Home Goods that we had no attachment to other than it just being like something we liked when we were in the store. So I like to kind of, I know this is a long thought process, but I like to talk about and show kind of different ways you can do stuff that's not expensive but still meaningful, because a lot of the things that make your home feel like your home or cozy or like your space are things that actually mean something to you. And if you go out and to Home Goods and try and buy something that like means something to you, it just won't. Like, it's just not, that's not an easy thing to do. Like, I wasn't gonna go to Home Goods and find the perfect like Starbucks piece that like reminded us of this specific point in time. So I do think there's a happy medium. Again, we are not like these rich people who go on these super extravagant vacations. Like, we both work a normal job and save and go on these little like weekend vacations, but they mean a lot to us, and so we incorporate that in our space.
Oh my god, Tay! Oh my god, I love this thing. This is so cute.
When my dad helped me purchase this property, it was 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and he even said at the time, like, I think it would be good for you to have an extra bedroom because then you can have a roommate. Like, he didn't really want me to live by myself, and he's like, I think you'll have friends or people who could use like a place to live. And so I have had, even with my fiance living with us, like, there have been times where there was 3 of us in the house. I've had a series of roommates, and so one of my best friends, my little actually, in my sorority, moved in with me, I believe in like 2017, maybe 2018, and she was she was so cute. Again, she was like excited to design her own space, and I didn't want to take that away from her, so I let her do that. And she was so excited to like paint for the first time. She was an art major, and ironically enough, like, she had done a lot of painting in high school, but like canvas painting. And so she didn't think painting walls was going to be difficult. And honestly, I've never found painting to be difficult. And I do understand that for some people that is really difficult. It has never been for me. So I had no like thoughts about her painting her bedroom. I was like, yeah, go for it. And she painted the room this like light lilac color it was pretty. It was not this, it was lighter than this. But I don't remember what brand of paint she bought, but the paint wasn't thick enough. So she had put, I think even at this point, 2 coats of paint on the wall. She didn't do a bad job painting, but you could see every brush stroke, you could see the color behind the color. Like, to this day, I've still never had this problem, so it might have just been like a product issue, but it looked like awful. And we both knew it looked awful. Like, she was not happy with this either. And I remember her grandfather coming down and visiting us, and he actually repainted the room for her. I had offered to, but it was kind of, he really wanted to do this, and so we both let him do this. But a couple years later, so 2019, she was kind of wanting to buy a couple things to have. She was wanting to update the room, and at this point she did ask me to help. And so I helped her do this space, and she really loved the color palettes of like purple and jade green, which you can see here. This was kind of the, I don't want to say like pop of color era, but focal walls were still really like popular at this point. So we made this like darker focal wall. She also really liked mid-century modern furniture. We found this dresser, I think maybe for like $50, and her and I painted the dresser. So this was her space. And then in 2020, my little moved out. She was living with her boyfriend at the time. And one of my other friends was finishing her master's program, and she needed somewhere to stay for like 10 months to finish that program. And so I offered for her to stay at the house, and I saw this as an opportunity to do some kind of like fun content piece or challenge. So she had no hand in the design in the videos that you had watched. I had about 3 months between the point that my other roommate moved out and she moved in over the summer to kind of like renovate this room. And so this was actually my first time creating an aesthetic for someone that they didn't have any hand in. And I don't really do this in general at all now, but at the time, like, that's what some traditional interior designers did. And so I kind of wanted to try my hand at this with someone I knew pretty well. We had been friends all through college. She was a close sorority sister. I knew her well enough to kind of make some decisions. So I renovated this entire space for under $1,000. I remember keeping track of everything I spent. And then this video that you see of her walking in was kind of like my reveal, my big reveal video. And I remember at the time, like, TikTok was starting to blow up again because it's like that pandemic era. And I randomly posted this video on TikTok. I was like, I don't know anything about TikTok. I've never been on TikTok. I'm just gonna like post this video and see what it does. And I got over like 200,000 views. Everyone was like commenting and being like so complimentary on this video. And I was so excited. Like, 200,000 views was like going viral for me at that time. But what's kind of funny in hindsight is I had posted this on a personal page. I didn't even have a business page on TikTok at the time. And I didn't post again for, I think, almost a year. So hindsight's 2020, and if I had gone back and continued posting at that point, I maybe would have had way bigger following than I do, but you know, baby steps. Now, again in 2020, same pandemic era, my fiance and I are spending a lot of time at the house. As I mentioned, he was working fully remote. At the time, I was working part-time as a nanny to kind of pay my bills while I did some of my like design projects on the side. And so at this point, we actually had a little bit of money to put into some larger like renovations. And I call this our quote unquote big investment because this entire project costed us $7,000 and we split everything in half. So that was just between the two of us. So over a series of, I want to say 6 to 8 months, we did all these projects and we just split the payments and it went on credit cards. And like, this is me saying that you can make changes to your house. They don't have to be, you don't have to set aside or have all this money set aside to start making like progress on projects. So, I mean, I do want to preface this by saying that I have a very small kitchen and we did a lot of the work ourselves, which again, I will talk about down the road. But I think so many people shy away from kitchen projects specifically because the price point or the thing that you think in your head is the price point feels so far out of range or so overwhelming that it gets pushed back for years. And so I do try and encourage people to take like small steps in a direction towards the kitchen they do want, even if you can't do everything you'd love to do at once. As I said, I hated those countertops more than anything else in my space. And so both my fiance and I were really committed to switching the countertops. Another thing I'd like to mention is that we are big food people, and we cook all the time. So outside of just not liking the aesthetic, we also didn't have a lot of countertop space. And for people who cook all the time, like we really wanted and needed more countertop space. And the kitchen is a decent size square foot in terms of square footage, but it was laid out so badly that there was a lot of missing potential. So we did slightly change the layout, as you'll see. You can kind of see here. We added a dishwasher that my dad installed for me. And then we bought an additional kitchen cabinet here. And if you look very closely, you can actually see that the door is not the same as the other doors, style-wise. But I tried this particular door style, had been like a discount something or other when the guy flipped our house before I purchased it. And so I couldn't buy this exact door anymore. So I found one online that was very similar. And since they're all painted, you really can't tell unless I point it out to someone. So we purchased that cabinet, we added the dishwasher, and then we paid for all new countertops. We ripped out the backsplash. My dad helped with this, and then my fiance actually and I learned to tile for the first time. So we helped. My dad will tell you I did not help that much, but I watched the process. The boys did not want me to interrupt. We tiled that entire wall. I wanted to tile the entire wall for visual reasons. So my dad actually kind of tried to talk me out of this, because functionally there's not really a purpose of having tile all the way to the ceiling. But from a visual aspect, having this line cut off below the cabinets was really shrinking the space. Like, my cabinets don't go all the way to the ceiling. The ceilings in our kitchen are one of the tallest ceilings in the house. And so this kind of low cutoff of the backsplash and then the low cutoff of the cabinets was making the space feel smaller when we actually had some height in this space. And so I kind of put my little foot down. I was the one paying for the tile. So we tiled all the way up to the ceiling to create that height. And that is a decision I've never regretted. And it is really easy to clean. Now, while we were working on this project and I was kind of looking at inspiration and finding things that I liked or didn't like, I really fell in love with the Smeg refrigerator. As I've mentioned, I have a little piece of my heart for vintage 50s, 60s aesthetic. And these vintage refrigerators I just thought were beautiful. But if you have ever looked at the price of a Smeg, you know that they are not cheap. And we hadn't really set aside money for, or even really planned to buy a refrigerator, because the refrigerator we had worked absolutely fine and we didn't have a bunch of money to spend, so it was being spent on functional things. And so in our mind, because my fiance also liked the retro refrigerators, we kind of said, we'll budget for this long term. This will be a project maybe we do 5 years down the road, but for now our refrigerator works. And so I did spend a little time looking and kind of planning and saying okay, which one will we need to get? How much is it? So we could set aside and plan for it. And when I was looking at Smeg refrigerators, I don't think a lot of people kind of know this, but they're not standard refrigerator sizes. So they're a lot thinner, and therefore, honestly, you lose a lot of space. So they don't hold as much as what you're used to a refrigerator holding. And through this process, again, of kind of trying to maximize our budget and maximize functional space, it didn't make sense to even budget or save for this refrigerator. It was going to be too small. It was going to look stupid in the space because the refrigerator would be here and then the cabinet would start here, and it was going to look crazy. And we couldn't really afford to lose refrigerator space. We needed, especially between Chad and I and our roommates, like we needed refrigerator space. So while I was going through this project, I came across Big Chill appliances. And it's kind of this niche, like if you know, you know product. But because I was looking at all these Smeg and like retro refrigerators, Big Chill came up. And what Big Chill does that I really love is they create kind of new modern appliances in a vintage aesthetic, but that are still size appropriate. So I really fell in love with this like Big Chill refrigerator. And if you go online, the refrigerator that we have is a $7,000 refrigerator. And there was no way we were paying $7,000 for a refrigerator. We didn't have the budget to do that. And so it was kind of just like this little pipe dream. I'm such a fan of Facebook Marketplace. I use it all the time in my personal projects. I encourage all my clients to use it because you can really find these like once in a lifetime deals. And this refrigerator is the best Facebook Marketplace story I can think of. Again, I was just kind of like daydreaming about this fridge that I knew I wasn't really going to have for quite a while. And I had randomly searched on Facebook Marketplace for a retro refrigerator. And once you search for something on Marketplace, it kind of sets up an alert so that, you know, when you refresh your feed, it's kind of giving you things you've searched for before. And so I was on looking for something completely else one day, and this refrigerator popped up, and it was the exact refrigerator I had wanted. It was the perfect size. I had wanted either white or I believe pink, but my fiance was voting for white. And it popped up this little house in Dunedin, and the guy was selling this refrigerator for $1,000. And I remember instantly messaging this man. I went out to my fiance, who was like working on his computer at the time, and I was like, we have to go out and see this refrigerator. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, so I show him the listing, and I'm like, the fact that this is being sold for $1,000, and the listing said like nothing was wrong with it. They had just bought the house, they were renovating things, whatever. And it felt like a moment that was like too good to be true. So I was like, we have to go see it because I'm not super confident that they're not lying to me. So we drove from Tampa to Dunedin. It was like an hour drive, and the guy was super nice. I guess the house, they had just bought this house from an older woman, and her entire kitchen had been all Big Chill appliances. It was this really cute 50s retro kitchen. And if he had had the stove at that time, I would have also bought the stove, because to this day, I would love to have this stove. But he had already sold the stove, and he was kind of funny. He was like, I actually really wanted to keep the refrigerator. I was going to keep it as like a beer fridge in the garage, but my wife is like making me sell this refrigerator. And so it just happened to be this like serendipitous or manifesting moment, and I was so excited. So this was kind of another step in my design journey. I'd gotten pretty comfortable creating a specific space. So a bedroom, an office. I felt good doing a design in the confines of one room. But this was the first time that I started to really focus on kind of the cohesive flow of the design of a space. So really the main section of my house is open concept. And a lot of times when I first started kind of designing spaces, I thought of them as one space. and I didn't always connect that space to the following space, if that makes sense. And so this was the first time that I really started to focus on this like cohesive concept. How do you make 2 spaces connect? How do you make 3 spaces connect? How do you make an entire house feel like it's part of the same house? Because when you like a lot of different styles, or you're kind of playing with concepts and trying to incorporate all the different things you like, a lot of times those rooms end up feeling very separate, and a lot of people like their spaces to kind of all come together. And it's not true of everyone. Some people don't have any problem if their office looks like a completely different house than the rest of their space. It is preference, but this was a skill I kind of really wanted to hone as something to offer to clients. And so this transition from the kitchen to the living room became really important. But as I mentioned, my living room is super, super, super small. I have very limited options on the couch I could buy, because from a functional standpoint, I wanted something I could actually lay down on. Like, that was a goal, that I could lay on my couch and watch TV. But my wall space and the way that room is set up, there's only one place that couch could go. And it's also not a long wall. So couch sizes really have kind of some like standard sizing. And my wall, of course, didn't fit in the standard sizing. So it took a lot of time and research for me to find a couch that would actually fit. Now, I will say from a scale perspective, this couch is not perfect. But again, I needed the couch to function. I needed to be able to lay down on the couch. So I had to walk this fine line of what does it look like and what do we need to functionally live. But because I had such specific requirements for the couch, I had to kind of design the space around the couch, which is really kind of a good place to start for a living room anyways, because it's such a large piece of furniture that even when you don't have a small living room, in most living rooms, it's still kind of like a focal point because of how large it is. And so we put the TV on the wall. I actually love the TV placement here. My dad does not. It's on a swivel, so you can pull it out and angle it towards the couch, or something that Chad and I both love is that we can pull it out and angle it towards the kitchen, so like I can watch TV super easily while I'm cooking. From a design point of view, I was trying to find a way to kind of make the kitchen and the living room flow together, but that the living room still had kind of a design or a personality or an opinion. So we use this black and white wallpaper that we both really loved. I found this vintage mirror. I think I paid like $50 for this mirror, and then I painted it. I liked that it had a different shape. I also liked that it was a bit more traditional, because my kitchen cabinets are very traditional. So I was trying to kind of blend these two concepts together. The black and white rug is very contemporary, but again, it brought like a fun pattern into the space, because a small room that all the walls are one color and you have no architectural interest feels flat very quickly. And one of the ways you can kind of combat that is through pattern. Now, these are bolder patterns than I think a lot of people would gravitate towards, but I like a bold pattern. I like a bold design. So this worked well for us. And then I was still kind of playing with these focal wall concepts. And so my fiance and I actually kind of built out this design on the bar. I flattened this wall, and then we built on top of it. And then I ended up choosing clear bar stools because, again, this space is very small. So every piece of furniture in the space visually takes up space. And so I liked the idea of these clear bar stools, not only because they were contemporary and kind of helped blend the traditional and contemporary concepts, but also because visually you didn't notice them. They didn't take up as much space. The space didn't feel as cluttered or compact because they're kind of see-through. There's a lot of small design decisions I made here that I'm proud of and that functionally made a lot of sense. But I will say that this living room, because I had to design or make so many decisions around very specific constraints, that this living room is not like my or my fiance's like dream living room. It was kind of working within the confines of what we had to work with, and is not necessarily like what I would pick or what he would pick when we do renovate our living room. Now, this space in my house has undergone probably more renovations or transitions than any other space in my house. So this is that last room. So when you enter my home from the front door, it's that living room you just saw, my kitchen's in the middle, and then there's this back room. And this back room is essentially the same size as the living room, except that it has my water heater in it. So this closet here is where my water heater is stored. So I can't take this out, and it also makes the layout of this room super awkward. So I can't flip. I couldn't make this back space my living room, because the only place a couch could go would be against these windows. And this is a big like sunroom. We get a lot of light. So there would be a constant glare on the TV if we put a TV here. And also the space here is so crazy. Like you'd be sitting so close to the TV. So I've never been able to make this space a living room. And it's always kind of been an awkward flex space for kind of a number of reasons. When I first moved into the house, it was the dining room. But like I said, for the time I was at in my life, it didn't make sense to have a dining room. I never used it. And so it really became, at one point it was my office. My fiance and I are both like very active, workout focused people. And there was a time in Tampa when everything shut down. So you couldn't go to a gym. You couldn't like go swim. There was a lot of restrictions. So I got the Peloton during COVID, and both of us were working out in the house a lot. So at one point it was like a little workout space. But the other interesting thing is we don't really use our front door. So basically every day we enter through the back door. So it's essentially our front door. But the problem with it being an office, the problem that we've both had even now at certain times, is that one of us will be working and then one of us is trying to take the dog out. Our laundry's in the garage, so I'm going back and forth for laundry. Like there's a lot of movement, even if I'm going to the bathroom to get ready, or one of us is going into the kitchen to like make food. It's a high traffic flow area, which sometimes becomes difficult when you work remote, because both of us have to, I record videos, but we both have meetings. Like I'll be on a meeting with a client or he'll be on a meeting with a client. And so it gets kind of chaotic in a 900 square foot house. But so this room has always been functionally a challenge, and it's gone through a lot of different stages. I really love my 2020 office from a design standpoint. Like I am an Anthropologie girl. I love a lot of their stuff. This was an Anthropologie rug. I really love rugs that feel like artwork. Like aesthetically, I love this space, but I could not work in this space because I was constantly kind of getting distracted by people moving. And at this point we just had our puppy, so I think there was like 4 months I basically didn't get anything done because we were training our puppy and trying to teach him that the green in my rug was not grass. So it didn't really work out. I couldn't get a lot done in this space. I ended up having to move it. Now this is exactly how the room looks. There was a lot of DIY projects that went into this space. Again, this video is long enough. But this is my fiance's office. So when we started working on this space together, we wanted him to have a separate space for his office. He, again, had changed jobs. He still works remotely, but he works basically as a consultant. So he's on calls, videos all day long. And we really wanted something that looked professional behind him. This is a big thing for a lot of people who work from home, especially in certain fields. Like, you want it to feel professional. You don't want to throw on your hoodie and then have to blur your background or put up like a fish tank background. And so sometimes he flips the layout. Sometimes the desk is under the artwork, and then sometimes he pushes it up against the window so that he has better lighting for video calls. The space works both ways. Aesthetically, I prefer the desk under the piece of artwork because the artwork we specifically picked and is scale appropriate for the desk. But from a functional standpoint, it's nice to have the option. We literally just slide it back and forth. But when we started working on the design, he really wanted, I'm laughing because he wanted something that's very opposite his personality. So he wanted an art gallery aesthetic feel. He wanted to like showcase different pieces of artwork that he wanted to like collect or invest in. And he wanted that to be the star of the show. And so when we first started talking about this, he wanted like all white walls. And I've actually worked in an art gallery. I interned at the Cleveland Art Museum when I was a senior in high school. And one of the things that's always struck me about art museums is that a lot of times they do paint all the walls white, but that doesn't really allow the artwork to stand out from the wall, because typically white is like the background of the artwork, so there's not a contrast between the two. And so I was trying to explain this to him, that like, if we want the artwork to stand out, the walls actually shouldn't be white, because you're going to pay more attention to the big expansive white walls, not the artwork. And at first he didn't believe me. And it took me holding up the artwork against the totally white wall for him to see it. And then he was like, oh, okay, I get it. And then I showed him digitally what that artwork looked like on certain colors and the way it enhances the artwork. And so that's why the room is the color that it is because we needed a color that tied into the kitchen and living room. He wanted some form of teal. He didn't want it super dark. So it's kind of funny. I actually think this is a very interesting paint color. It looks really good in certain lighting. It looks okay in other lighting. Even the lighting in this photo I don't think is the greatest. This color, more than any of the other colors in my house, changes a lot based on time of day, daylight, what the light bulbs, which light is on. And sometimes I really like it and it feels perfect for the space, and sometimes like it just feels not quite right. But there are certain spaces that just never photograph as well as they look in person. So we like it. It works for now. I don't know that we do this specific color again, knowing kind of how the light changes now, but we're happy with it. So this is probably like our most recent project. I am in the middle of 2 right now, and I'm going to do a full home tour in the near future. But this is the last project that I have like finished. We ended up switching which room we used as our bedroom because of our bathrooms. So I have a quote unquote primary bedroom in the front of my house that is my old original bedroom, the first one you saw, and it has the world's tiniest bathroom attached to it. And I say that because it's not a powder. It doesn't just have a toilet. It has a toilet, a sink, and a shower. But the shower is so crazy small. Like if you're standing in the shower, you're about 2 inches from the wall and 2 inches from the shower curtain. Like it is crazy tight. And no one wants to shower in that all the time. But our second bathroom, which is between our office and this space, is our nicer bathroom. It has a tub, it has a shower into the tub, we have a bigger vanity, and so we were both getting ready in that bathroom, and so we decided to switch the layout because we didn't need a bunch of space in our bedroom. We don't spend time in our bedroom outside of like in our bed. So we wanted the function of being closer to the big bathroom. And then we thought the front room is really going to be turned into kind of a transition space, for lack of better words. We have a lot of family visit. So, I mean, if I count it up, probably 4 months out of the year, we have people staying with us that are visiting, whether it's friends, family, whatever. So we've always kind of had a guest space, but it's been difficult, especially with roommates, and I've had to change things around a lot because we don't have a big enough house to just have a dedicated guest room that does nothing else function-wise for us. And so I kind of came up with this idea probably about a year ago now that front room, because it's our largest room, was going to function both as a guest room and our living room. So I have been in the process of trying to find like a Murphy bed or a sofa that can be turned, that pulls out into a bed, to make that a more flexible, usable space for us. But it also makes sense that the guest room would have the smaller bathroom. So that is kind of a long-term project. It hasn't been something I'm focusing on right now. Like I said, this was the last project we finished. So step one of that process was moving our bedroom. So this is actually what you have seen as the guest bedroom, as my roommate's room. And one of the challenges of this room, it's not super large, but that the closet was in a really awkward space. It made putting a bed and furniture and kind of placing and layout of that furniture really difficult. So we decided to rip it out. My dad was nervous about this one. Chad and I did this project all on our own. Well, I should say my friend helped us tear it down. She had a lot of fun doing that, but it was our first demo project. So we took the entire closet out, and then we did compound, we fixed the walls, we actually smoothed the walls. This is a separate rant. I live in Florida. It's super common in Florida to have textured walls. I grew up north. It's not super common to have textured walls up north. So that was a big switch for me, and it has been one of the annoying constraints of my design process because you can't put wallpaper on textured walls. You can't put molding on textured walls. There's so many things that I would love to do that just, you can't. I don't want to say you can't. You can. It'll look bad. So I finally basically got fed up with it 2 years ago, and we started flattening the walls. And again, I will talk about that process because that is a story. But that's what we had to do in this space. So we had to do it to fix the walls in general because we had to pull out this closet. So we smoothed all the walls, we smoothed the ceiling, we painted the space. My dad makes fun of me because he hates that I painted the ceiling in this room. I do not know why. Chad and I love it. this room feels like a small, dark box. And if you don't like that, like, obviously I wouldn't suggest someone else do this. But I am someone who cannot sleep if I see the smallest light. Like, I am not a nightlight person. I can't sleep with the TV on, the light's too bright. Like, I'm very picky when it comes to how I sleep. And so when I was kind of designing this space, we kind of cared about two things. One, that we had a king bed, and two, that we added closet space, because my fiance and I at the time were sharing a built-in closet in my office, and we were starting to run out of space because there's not much storage in my house to begin with. It's small in terms of size, and so our closet storage was also being used as storage for all kinds of other things throughout the house. So it wasn't even just clothing. And so when we were thinking about doing renovations for this room, one of the things I wanted to do was basically double our storage space. But when we first started it, the closet wasn't there at the beginning. So we started, we're gonna rip this closet out, and my dad was kind of concerned about resale value because in Florida, I think it depends on the state, but most states, to list a house or sell a space as a bedroom, it has to have both a window and a closet. And at this point, my dad was like, you're covering the window and you're tearing out the closet. Like, what are you doing? You're killing resale value. And and I had to talk him kind of down because, yes, I covered the window. The tapestries just hung over the window. So from the inside of the house, you don't know there's a window there. From the outside of the house, it just looks like there's like closed curtains. It's like covered. So I said, when we go to list the house, sell it, whatever we're gonna do, like, I'll just pull the tapestry off, like, it'll be fine. And then I said, I want to do built-ins in the closet. My dad's the one who does the built-ins, but and if you don't have time, or if for some reason we were to sell the house before that happens, like, I will go and buy a basic IKEA wardrobe and put it in the room, and like that constitutes legally in Florida as a closet. So finally kind of like calmed down a little bit, and this was the progression. So we tore it out, we fixed the walls, we fixed the ceiling, we painted everything, and then we bought this bed. I had been in love with this bed for probably 2 years, and I didn't know how my fiance was going to feel about it because it feels to me like a Cinderella bed. It's this very specific color of blue. It is a little feminine with the velvet and the metal. But he actually liked it. And I will say it's not a super girly like color of blue. So I was excited that he agreed. We both liked the bed frame. But retail value of this bed from Anthropologie is, I believe, like $2,500. It's not terrible for a bed frame, but it's also not cheap for a bed frame. And so I waited because, being someone who really likes Anthropologie and buys a lot from the brand, Anthropologie puts almost everything on sale. And so if you have the patience and you wait long enough, you can basically get most of the things you want at a discount. And so I waited, and eventually this bed went on sale, and we bought the bed frame for $1,500. And that has been one of our like big boy, big girl purchases, but we are both thrilled with the bed. And then we also ended up investing in a new mattress because we had never had king size anything. I didn't have a king size mattress. So we invested in the mattress, and for I think about a year, that's all that was in the room. It was our bed, our mattress, the TV my dad gave us. It was an old TV, so we had a TV on the wall, but there was no storage. I had a nightstand that I had used as an end table in our living room a couple years ago that was in there. And so for a year, that's all it was. And I say that not really to bore you, but to show you that like there are transition phases. So everyone always posts on Instagram like the before and after, but no one ever tells you what the time difference was between those two like pictures. Because I think for most people who don't make mass amounts of money, that transition period is long. That transition period is only super quick if you have the money to buy absolutely everything you want that day. And so that's not the reality for most people. But I talk about that transition phase because I think a lot of people have a hard time in that transition phase because you've spent some money and the room looks kind of like you want, but not fully like you want. And you lose a little steam because the room functions as it should. It's fine, it's working, you're not thinking about it. But then over time, you have kind of the money to do more projects, but you don't always know like what that's going to look like. And so one of the things I really talk about when like designing or planning a space is having a visual goal, like having a plan so that as you buy pieces, you're not getting discouraged that we're not at that final stage yet because you see how it's going to come together. But if you're kind of running blind without that final visual, then the amount of time you spend like second guessing everything you put in that space, or even if you're gonna buy something else to continue that space, becomes such a mental like headache. So I had a visual plan for this space. I knew kind of where I wanted the built-ins. I knew specifically what kind of end table I wanted. And then I just kept looking on Facebook Marketplace because I wasn't going to buy something new because I didn't need to. Aesthetically, I could kind of save money on that spot and then spend more on like our bed. The tapestry, I would love to give a shout out to this company, but I don't think they're still kind of in existence. I saw this TikTok video of this creator who had bought a tapestry, and if you like tapestries and you've ever tried to purchase one, they're very expensive because most of them are old, for lack of better words. Like there's not a bunch of companies making brand new tapestries. So you're buying a lot of like vintage secondhand or like what's considered investment art pieces, not, you know, something for your bedroom for most people. So I saw this video on TikTok of this creator on Etsy who was making these kind of tapestries that were modern in terms of production, but aesthetically kind of looked and felt like some of these really, really expensive tapestries. And so I ordered it basically immediately because, again, I have never seen this. I had been looking for something kind of for a while. So that tapestry was actually, I think the tapestry was like $500, and I bought it with Afterpay and I paid it off in like 6 months. And again, I would really love to give them a shout out, but that video that I saw went viral on TikTok, and the guy was hand like producing these pieces, and he got so many orders in one day that he just couldn't keep up with demand. I remember I got an email from him saying like, hey, this video blew up. I have all these orders. Your timeline's gonna be like pushed back, which was fine. I wasn't like upset, but it just goes to show that like it's really hard for people to create kind of a product that is super time intensive and then sell on a mass scale. So he ended up shutting down the shop because he couldn't keep up with the orders. So I feel lucky actually that I was able to actually like pay for and get this piece, and I really love it. And like I said, I really love to like promote or support him, but I do know the last time I looked that this shop had been shut down on Etsy. If you have watched this entire video, I really want to thank you because you have heard all my rants and you have seen the full thought process and the full timeline of kind of how everything came to be. I use this and I say all of this not because I love talking about myself. I actually kind of don't, and I'm sure you know or saw at some points that this made me uncomfortable. But I decided, and my fiance talked me into doing this video because so many people feel this way or like have a similar story or path. And like I said, I really created my business and I try to create products that help people through these small stages, even when you don't have a lot of money, because I do really believe, and I hope that this video has showed you that like you don't have to have a ton of money to have a nice home. You really don't. You just have to understand and have certain design skills to create something, and those skills can be learned and taught, and someone can help you through that process, and it doesn't have to cost you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So, you know, I've had clients come to me, and some people even said, like, I only have $1,000 for this space. Great. I'm gonna help you spend that $1,000 on your space in the best way possible, where you're going to get the largest impact, because I've had to do this. And I think a lot of times on social, people try and fight with me or like argue, well, this costs this amount or this costs that amount, and I don't have a car, I can't do this. Like, and some people have harder circumstances 100% than I do. Like I said, I am so grateful and fortunate that my dad kind of bought the property when he did, and that I've even had the opportunity to do some of these projects. But a lot of the clients I work with are actually in better financial situations than I am. And so I think if you look at what I've been able to create with what very tiny small funds we've had, then it lends itself really well to, if you only have the amount of money I have, here's what I can do. And if you have more money than I have, imagine what we can do, because I will make every cent count.